Hello to all of my beautiful internet friends. This is Mork. I'm recording this in a secure location known as Bubba's Kitchen. Welcome to another podcast episode of Twin Peaks: The Gifted, ... and The Damned. Bubba is not with us tonight for reasons that we cannot explain without violating several court orders and at least 2 subpoenas, so I'm going to do my best to fly solo without him, Bubba. He may or may not be hanging out with Catfish tonight, but I feel bad for him that he did not get to watch episode 11 of Twin Peaks, also known as Part 11, There's Fire, where you are going. I was really into it. I'm going to go through it as best I can in the shortest, most declarative sentences as possible. I will not have Bubba here to zap me with the cattle prod as he often does, so I apologize in advance, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I'm going to say right off the bat that I really did like this episode. It was not perfect. But I'm going to give it 8. Oh man, let's see. 8 double S's. Okay, no one is going to ask me what double S stands for, so I am just going to tell you double S stands for Sooty Steps, the steps that Cole saw when he stared through the swirling skies, through the black hole that existed somewhere in South Dakota. Speaking of South Dakota, we have one listener in South Dakota, so hopefully you don't live near this black hole, and no woodsmen have come for you. We'd like you to bring some friends if you can next time around. We appreciate each one of you, because there's only one of you. But a lot going on in South Dakota. We're not going to start in South Dakota. We're going to start in Vegas. But before we start in Vegas, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you want to win any of our amazing prizes, so I'm here in Bubba's house, and people hit me up on Twitter at Extraordinary. That's extraordinary with a W in front of the final R. And just, if you need appliances, some silverware, if you're from Canada, maybe you call it cutlery. Bubba's not paying any attention for a couple of days at least, so I'm happy to include that in whatever prize that you win. To do that, you gotta give us a written review on the iTunes store, and also you gotta like us on Facebook. Our Facebook page is Double P Podcasts. That's double, the letter P, the word podcasts, which is plural. And drop us a line, join the conversation. It's a lot of fun. We do, in addition to Twin Peaks, we also cover on the Joffrey of podcasts. We cover Game of Thrones. On Got Your Milk, Bubba and I cover The Strain and all sorts of really fun shows. So anyway, but first, I want to read a couple of our cool reviews. We'll start across the pond. This is from Cool K in the UK. Fantastic, 5 stars. Oh, this is so cool. One of the best podcasts I've stumbled upon in a very long time. Well, I don't know what that says about how long you've been listening to podcasts, but we do appreciate it. Bubba and Mork have great banter between each other, and I enjoy listening to their take and theories on every new episode as weeks roll by. Highly recommended from one of your Scottish fans. Oh my god, it's amazing. So it's basically the freest part of the UK. Thank you so much, Cool K. We really appreciate that. Let's head back to the US of A. This is from FU from Southwest Virginia. We appreciate that. Awesome podcast. Candle, high heel, coffee cup, tree, dollar bill, bag sign, balloon, donut, microphone, 5-star rating. I don't know how they got that through the iTunes censors, but they did. God bless you, FU. Love the intro and love your insight and theories from each episode. I actually enjoy the after shows and discussion even more than the Twin Peaks episodes. Smiley face. LOL. Can you imagine if we had podcast and YouTube in the 1990s when season 1 and 2 originally aired? Thank you for the podcast. Can't wait to listen to the new ones. Oh man, that's so cool. All right, this is from Eddie H. 1958. Eddie, we appreciate your honesty. What does Eddie love? Timeliness. It's called Timely, 4 stars. This is not my favorite Twin Peaks podcast, but I do have to give them credit for putting out the episodes immediately. I will usually listen simply because they are the first ones to release a podcast after a new episode of Twin Peaks has aired. That is true. That's all we got. Timeliness, we're going to stick to it. From that Risa, a must-listen companion to the show. Back to 5 stars. Phew, thank goodness. Okay, I look forward to Bubba and Mork's take on each week's episode as much as I do the episode itself. Holy cow. These two are knowledgeable, extraordinary. Thank you, that Risa. I appreciate you pointing that out. And just plain fun to listen to. While I am an avid watcher, I have always felt uneasy at the depiction of violence on Twin Peaks, especially towards women. Some podcast hosts have used these scenes as an opportunity to crack their clever jokes, and it has turned me off. Mork and Bubba handle such scenes with pitch-perfect tone, and I appreciate their sensitivity, insight, and great chemistry. Keep it up. Well, we will definitely try. At least I will try tonight, because God knows what Catfish is making Bubba do. Very enjoyable TP podcast. 5 stars. This is from Einley8. I think I said that right. Einley8. I am listening to at least 6 Twin Peaks podcasts right now, and they are all good and they're all right, but I think I enjoy The Gifted and The Damned the most. They are witty and sharp, and I enjoy their discussions of each episode. Count me among your double L's. Oh, man, that is so cool. Okay. Alrighty. Well, let's jump in. That was very fun. I do want to mention that, unlike Bubba, I am a crass materialist. I'm a complete capitalist, so I have sold a sponsorship for tonight's podcast. I have sold it to Steve, Carol's husband, and Steve would like to apologize, and he would like another chance. So good luck, Steve. Okay, let's see here. We are going to start. Why don't we start? I'm talking to myself, people. We're going to start in Vegas. Dougie Coop, a lot of business going. So when we last left Las Vegas, there was a job to be done by Mr. Anthony Sinclair, played by the amazing Tom Sizemore, who is luring Dougie Coop into a trap. Dougie Coop was a little too busy to realize that he was being lured into a trap because Janie E. had some chores for him to do. So we see him at work. We don't know if it's the next day or not, but we assume it's the next day. And Dougie Coop is being lured with coffee into Mullen's office, and Tony is watching this, and we're not totally clear if Dougie is being if he needs the coffee badly because he just loves coffee and he needs more of it, or because Janie E. in fact gave him 2 more rides. But he is led into the office, and Mullins, he's got a plan. He has noticed, number one, that there is a little bit of crime and corruption in Las Vegas. So that's a victory already. And he does a good job handling the plot check for us. He probably knew that Bubba wasn't going to be here tonight, so he sort of explains that, we noticed in your reports, in the investigative reports, that in fact, the Mitchum boys, it was not arson. It was a total accident. They are entitled to their insurance claim, and this is completely the opposite of what Anthony Sinclair had told them repeatedly and loudly when we last saw the Mitchums, who I gotta say are starting to grow on me. Not just because Candy, played by the amazing and wonderful and lovely Amy Shields, who will sign, she actually already has signed, these amazing copies of The Secret History of Twin Peaks, written by Mark Frost, that you will win if you enter our contest, and we will bribe you just like Steve bribed us to help him get back together with Carol. Anyway, back to short declarative sentences. So the Mitchums are not liable, and there is a $30 million check just sitting for them, and no problem. Mullins, he doubled down, as he often does. You're in Vegas, you gotta play to win, and so their insurance company is going to be covered. So Mullins is handling a lot of the exposition for us because Dougie Coop is still not talking. So we cut to, where do we go? Well, we go to the Breakfast Nook. Apparently, the Mitchums not only work together and play together, but they live together. And Bradley, played by Jim Belushi, is a little groggier. He's not quite ready to have his breakfast cereal yet, but he comes out. And let me just point out real quick, I don't know who exactly is handling the product placement for Kellogg's Raisin Bran, but they're doing a very, very good job. So they are getting ready, and Bradley seems to, at first, be really looking forward to killing Coop and or Dougie Coop, excuse me. He can't wait to get it done, but it seems like he had a bad dream, and he's kind of settling into his day. I do want to point out wherever they bought these amazing satin robes, which, number one, they're worth mentioning because it's very similar to what Bubba and I wear to record these podcasts. I'm a little warm because I'm actually wearing 2 of these satin robes this evening, but they're getting ready. Something is going down, and we know that this is not going to be good for Dougie Coop. So Dougie Coop and Mullins are getting ready to go. It's 5:30, and Dougie Coop, though, he has a better idea. Mike beckons. Mike, who we haven't seen, Mike the one-armed man, we haven't seen him in a while. There's another vision. The last time we saw these visions were good things have happened. So the last time that Dougie Coop, every time Dougie Coop, sees one of these visions, good things happen. So maybe it's at the casino, maybe it is when he's at home, going over the reports and finding some of the nefarious doings of Mr. Anthony Sinclair. But this is a good sign. So Mike beckons, and so Coop walks into. We can't really tell what it is, but when he walks out of the building, apparently all that Mike needed some help with was some shipping, because Coop just leaves the building with a box. Mullins is guiding him out. They walk past the statue, which I hadn't noticed this. Maybe some of our sharp-eyed, we know you because you're listening to the podcast, but you wouldn't notice this without watching the show, and that's how gold the agent statue is outside of the building where Ike the Spike tried to attack Coop a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of days ago, but in the past anyway. So Coop has his box. We're not sure what's in it yet. I'm sure people were having flashbacks like me, maybe a little bit of Seven. That was not really where I thought it would go, but we don't know. We're going into the desert. We learn that this is sharp-eyed viewers would remember that this is the limo driver who guided Dougie Coop when he was the fresh Mr. Jackpot's home from the casino back to the house with the red door where Janie and Sonny Jim live. And so they hit the road, and they are going to Santino's. So they hit the road. They're driving. Apparently, while we listen to, by far, the most depressing version of Viva Las Vegas, but we seem to be going to Santino's second, newer location. It's comfortably located off the strip, so the parking is very easy. It's apparently never crowded because they are in the middle of nowhere. I think in the background, if you look closely, you can see Joe Pesci digging a hole. But so we cut and we see Bradley and his brother, also last name Mitchum, but I can't remember his first name now. And Bubba is not here to remind me and give me a cattle prod. But Bradley's brother is reminding us all the reasons why they need to kill him. And Bradley seems to be having second thoughts. There's something that he's chewing on. He can't really remember what it is, but as Dougie Coop's gigantic, non-conspicuous white limousine gets closer and closer to the Mitchum boys, parts of Bradley's dream start to come back. He's remembering things. So by the time he gets out of the car, he's about to be left. And apparently the limo driver, when he's not driving people out into the middle of the desert to be murdered in cold blood, apparently his side gig is as a janitor on the Death Star. He doesn't seem to have too much of a problem. He's got a job, and he's got bills to pay like the rest of us. So Bradley starts to think of his dream. He remembers a couple of key points. One of them is there's something specific. If there's going to be something specific in that box, what could it be? So, of course, we're hoping it's not going to be Gwyneth Paltrow's head. That's a spoiler alert for if you haven't seen Seven. But we have no idea what it's going to be. And so they get out the cab. Bradley's older, meaner brother pulls his gun, aims it at him, at Dougie Coop, and demands to know what's in the box. He demands to know what's in the box. Bradley runs over, he stares inside the box, and what do we see inside? It's a cherry pie. This is big. This is amazing. We've had coffee. Dougie Coop, rather, has had coffee. He's had case files. He's had a little bit of martial arts practice. He's had a little bit of arm flapping practice, we'll call it. But he has not had cherry pie. What does this mean? So they look in. This is a sign. This is a really big sign. Now, apparently, it's not the fact that they lost $30 million or even that they have $30 million that is going to change the Mitchum Brothers' hearts. No, you cannot close a deal without a check. I'm sorry. You cannot close a deal without a cherry pie. The $30 million is almost irrelevant. They decide to not kill him before they even discover that he had their check in his pocket. And so it's one of those, which came first, the check or the cherry pie? We will never know, but it's a cool moment. And the Mitchum Brothers, I gotta say, are really growing on me. We talked about this a little bit a couple weeks ago, where the Mitchum Brothers occupy a pretty similar place to what the Horn Brothers used to many, many years ago. I hope the Mitchum Brothers don't suffer the same fate as the Horn Brothers do in 25 years. But the Mitchum Brothers are, they're not quite running the town, that's for sure, but they are sometimes on the right side, sometimes on the wrong side of the law. That doesn't seem to bother them at all. That is okay. They got to get the job done, and they actually seem to. They're going to survive. They're obviously surviving, but they're going to survive even more now that they get their check for $30 million. They're growing on me a lot. I don't know what it is exactly, but they're working. And Candy doesn't hurt either. Okay, so I apologize for that, everybody. There was a small frog fly that just tried to sneak into Bubba's basement. I had to squash it. Anyway, so they hug, they howl at the moon. There's only one place to go after that, and that is actually Santino's. So they get back to Santino's. They're in a red booth. There's a piano player. It might be Trent Reznor in disguise. We don't know exactly, but there are toasts. There is cherry pie. Our girls show up, led by Candy, who is not paying attention at all to the Mitchum Brothers. She's very distracted. I wonder if there's something else going on that we don't know about. But she's not as on the ball as she had been. So they enjoy some champagne. They enjoy some music. Our friend, from the casino, recognizes Mr. Jackpots, and her life is great. She now is no longer getting dressed out of a dumpster. She has a sequin gown. She's got some sort of weird I don't know what to call it. Anyway, it's a fancy necklace. There's a term for it that Bubba would tell me, but I don't know. Anyway, she's got her son. Her relationship with her son is finally fixed. Her dog is taken care of. Hopefully, she'll be able to continue to be happy and healthy and live her whole life. She shares with the Mitchum boys what a great guy Coop is, and that is pretty cool. So anyway, the episode comes to an end here. I wanted to start off in Vegas because there is some big stuff happening both in South Dakota as well as Twin Peaks, and we'll end up in Twin Peaks. But first, we have to do another advertisement. This is from Steve, and Steve says to Carol, "I'm really sorry. I promise I will do the dishes." So anyway, good luck with that, Steve. Hope that works out for you. Okay, so the episode ends on our piano player, and there are some tunes, and I'll be honest, flying solo, I couldn't tell you. I could not tell you. It was recognizable. I didn't stay through the credits because we had to set up some some good stuff here so we could do the podcast. So I do apologize for that. But we end the episode to a somewhat familiar tune. I did notice briefly, one small thing. Afterwards, it seemed a little odd to me in terms of the Mitchums finding out that Coop is not such a bad guy. It struck me as a little odd that they weren't immediately going to go chase down Anthony Sinclair. This guy was giving us such terrible advice, telling us, we had to go do something about him, and he could not have been more wrong. So I'm not sure what exactly is going to happen to Anthony Sinclair. I'm not sure what's going to happen to the people who seem to be working for Mr. C in Vegas, the Las Vegas casino rivals, what they're going to be doing. I don't know exactly, and how they are going to resolve their issues, maybe with the Mitchum Brothers. If the Mitchum Brothers are going to go after them, I don't know. We'll have to see. But we will. Okay, so we're going to go, and this entire sequence is for really just our one listener in South Dakota who we love. What's going on? Well, there's actually a ton of stuff going on here in South Dakota, as our one South Dakota listener can tell us. Okay, so Cole, Albert, Tammy, Diane are rolling up in one car, and our favorite detective and Bill Hastings are following them. So our FBI gang, current and former, get out of the car. Hastings is, he's a prisoner, so he's going to stay in the back of his car. The detective is going to stay in the car too. Tammy walks over, and I think previously Tammy was a bit better of an interrogator than she is now. They've arrived at this place that seems to be an interdimensional portal of somehow it's a gateway to another universe or something. It seems there's no clear instructions on how to get in, but there is a pretty big hole in the fence. I don't know if those instructions are really what we needed to get. I'd like to think that 3 FBI special agents could figure out how to get closer to the house, but as Tammy and Bill are talking, we see in the distance, we see a woodsman. And as he dissolves and disappears, something very cool happens, something pretty gigantic in terms of these worlds, not just these storylines, but these worlds colliding. Albert and Cole, not to mention Bill, see this guy, and they see that he disappeared. So, okay, this is not just going to be, good old, Sheriff Harry Truman hanging out outside of Glastonbury Grove waiting, for Coop to come in or out. These guys seem to recognize that there's something very odd, to put it short and declaratively, going on here, and so they walk in. So they go in, and Cole is a little bit further ahead of Albert, and as Cole gets a little bit closer, I don't know if Albert's got a little jet lag, but Albert's vision starts to get a little bit blurry, and so it looks like Cole is going through some kind of a barrier. Now you can see the house just fine, but as Cole passes a certain threshold, I don't know if it's, let's just call it wacko vision. It starts to affect him. Now, it also is affecting him from the opposite angle that Cole, or that Albert cannot see Cole from. But Cole looks up in the sky, and he's right on the precipice of something huge that we don't know, and it is essentially, it looks like a black hole. Tammy is supposed to be keeping an eye out on, covering her superiors in the FBI. Tammy seems to be looking the opposite direction, so she's not getting really any of this, but she's making sure that no one attacks them from the front. She's ignoring the giant black hole. She's ignoring what Albert sees in terms of Cole starting to disappear. Cole does not run away. Cole stands his ground, and he reaches out. Something is coming down, or something's coming up. I have no direction, but it's something is coming at him. And, we have theorized a little bit about, well, where does Cole stand in this? He seems to know more. He seems to be, maybe using people as decoys. Is he going to be on the same side as our Dougie Coop? Obviously, we don't want him to be on the same side as Mr. C, but he seems to be very comfortable. Is he aware of this? We don't know. We don't know to what extent. Obviously, there's a history between Cole and Major Briggs and all sorts of stuff going back. But is this specific gateway something that he knows about? Obviously, they needed to get the directions from Hastings, but he's reaching out for it. He's not running away from it. He's reaching out towards it. And what we see coming through, at first it looks like a ball. I wasn't sure if it was going to be another golden Laura ball, if it was going to be, perhaps another, blob. But it's a vision. It's a vision of the sooty steps that I was talking about. And as Cole sees those dirty, dirty men in a room, he starts to flicker a little bit as if he's going to vanish. Albert is not freaking out also, incidentally. Albert is playing it super cool, and he just calmly reaches out and pulls Cole back from this precipice. And he's safe. But they start to hear things, and they look around, and they notice something. Albert notices that there is a body in the field. Tammy doesn't seem to be worried about this. Diane doesn't seem to be worried about this. But as they approach the body, we have a couple ideas of who that might be. But as they get closer, Diane does not seem to be too concerned. She seems to see the woodsman character who flashes in and then disappears. So they examine the body. It appears to be, according to Albert, it's Ruth Davenport. And Albert is, let's just say he's far less obtuse than I am. And he gets into it right away. He's a forensics guy. He's a pathologist. So, he starts to do what he needs to do in terms of taking pictures. They're very distracted by as I would like to think most of us would be, by a nude, headless body that's obviously been... there seems to be some foul play. I don't want to jump to any conclusions. There is, what's that called? Due process. But there seems to be foul play. So as they're being distracted by this, a woodsman or a dirty bearded man starts, walking towards the car where our detective and Hastings are hanging out. And much like how the woodsman, poor man's Abe Lincoln from episode 8, mind-blowing episode 8, approached the car on the highway, and it looked like he was going into the front seat, but no. We start to hear a crunch, and we remember what that crunch is, and we don't need to see it. The detective sees it, Diane sees it, and our detective calls in for backup, but Diane just gives him one look, and she knows there's no backup for this. Cole, Tammy, Albert, they walk over, and they are, they see the damage that's done. Bill Hastings, the top half of Hastings' head is gone. We have no idea how our guy got out, and they kill Hastings, we presume at the direction of, we presume Mr. C, who, number one, wants those coordinates, number two, these woodsmen, kind of helped heal Mr. C when he got shot by Ray. And so we presume that they're there on his instructions. I can't help but wonder, okay, well, why aren't these, if these woodsmen are there at the gateway, can't they can't they communicate with Mr. C? They don't. I mean, obviously they don't seem to be. Otherwise, they might have given him a heads up. Or Mr. C already knows exactly where to go. So there's some major mind blowing things, and I don't keep saying major just because of Major Garland Briggs, but essentially we have three FBI agents who have just seen a ghost, at least. We have two other witnesses who've seen something unexplainable happen. And, oh, by the way, potentially a portal to another dimension. So, what to do? Well, let's just go back to the detective's office and hang out for donuts and coffee. What else is there to do? So Cole and Diane and Albert are hanging around, and Albert is one of the great things about Albert is he is an equal opportunity skeptic. Even back to seasons 1 and 2, he took it out a lot of the time on the locals and our denizens of Twin Peaks, but he's always looking, and he's always aware of what's going on, and he seems to be pretty skeptical of Diane. He seems like he knows that, and maybe it's because of the non-coded message. The message itself may have been encrypted, but the words were obviously not coded. That Diane responded to the text from Mr. C. But something is happening at this table, and it's a big deal in terms of our lore, and that's somebody's arm, and it's Cole's, is shaking. And this is, this season we've seen a couple people deal with that, namely Dougie Jones before, his arm just went dead, before Dougie Coop showed up through the electric socket. But that is, it does not bode well. And so it does bring up, well, has Cole gotten too close? Was Cole trying to flip somebody? One of our dirty bearded men? I don't know, but I think we're going to find out, and I think we're going to find out that Cole has been a deeper, more central part of this than we had thought. So they're chit-chatting, and they decide they're going to look at some evidence of from the day, and they have taken some time, apparently not to notify the president or second in command of the FBI, Denise Duchovny, about this other dimension or this ghost who crushes people's heads. But they have taken some time to head over to Kinko's and print that out, and they're going to examine it. And Gordon wants to see it. Diane's right there. She's going to take a look. It's curious that Diane is just part of the trip at this point. I mean, she had kind of disappeared. They made it sound like she had sort of disappeared from the FBI. They had to track her down a little bit. They didn't know where she lived, but they know where she drank. And they're looking at a major piece of evidence, and they're doing it right in front of her. I don't know if that's a big deal or not, but it's what they're doing. And Albert, who ever aware, he sees Diane memorizing these coordinates. This is not the slickest thing she's ever done. She's mouthing them to herself, but she catches herself. She catches him looking, and she says, "Oh, you know what? I gotta go get a smoke." There's a little bit of interplay. I don't know if Albert is trying to get her to stay behind by saying, those things are bad for you, and he tells himself off before she can. But they start talking about, where could these coordinates be from, and it's interesting. Albert starts to say that they indicate the first part of the numbers, because the last parts are smudged, but the first part of the numbers indicate a place somewhere in the north, a small town in the north. I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. It's either gonna be in the northeast or northwest part of Washington State. Why that is surprising to Albert or Cole or Diane, who has to know about Twin Peaks, the city, and possibly the show. I mean, we don't know what dimension we're watching at this point, but wouldn't Mr. C, who first set foot on Earth in Twin Peaks? I mean, that's the first. That's his birthplace. Would he not know about those coordinates? So we don't know exactly. So it might be maybe it's Deer Meadow, the town from Firewalk with Me, that's close by. Maybe it's somewhere else. We don't know exactly, but we do know that they have there's a trail, and so I hope that they're going to be heading down that trail. Tammy comes back in holding coffee and donuts, and there's cream. It's quite the feast. Now Diane does something curious where she asks if she can smoke, and is told that there's no smoking allowed. But instead of using that as an excuse to run outside and smoke a cigarette and do some texting with Mr. C, we presume, she just stays there. And she convinces Mackley, that's the detective's name, who, if you couldn't tell, I just remembered because I'm reading the closed captioning. But she stays there, and she doesn't go out. She doesn't rush out. So it is definitely questions upon questions with Diane. She could run out right away and give this information. She does not. She, when she sent her message, and Bubba and I were, kind of going back and forth a little bit, and there's a little bit of an exchange on Twitter and Facebook, about this. So, maybe Diane not coding her words at all she was trying to get caught. I don't know exactly, who she's loyal to. I wouldn't be surprised if she's just being loyal to herself because of all that she knows and all that she's seen over the years. But there's really, like with Cole, only one way to find out, and that is to keep watching. So they try to figure out what exactly happened to Hastings. They know it wasn't a bullet. It's all they're sort of piecing it together. They don't seem to be doing this too urgently, which is a little curious again, and it only makes me think that this is exactly as what they presumed. That obviously there are other dimensions at play and doppelgangers, and but I have a little trouble with that. So I'm not sure why they're not making a bigger deal out of this. But Cole even brings it up. Cole, who's an extremely senior official in the FBI, starts telling 4 people. Two of them are also in the FBI. Another is a policeman, and another is a woman who is not afraid to tell anybody to go F themselves, as we've seen many, many times. Cole starts telling everybody what he saw. Dirty, bearded men in a room. It was a black and white room. We won't get into that. But no one can really figure it out. He had a vision. He can't quite explain it. No one seems to really mind, and he doesn't seem to mind that they know this either. So, questions upon questions upon questions. I'm someone who has been a little frustrated with some of the pace of I guess the strands of the show coming together, and now they seem to be coming together in a big way. Not just storylines, as I said a little while ago, but these many dimensions. So let's go back to what I still feel is the most important place in the show. It also happens to be the title of the show, and that is Twin Peaks. So we see some boys playing catch, and they're back and forth. Looks like it's a boy and his little brother, and then they're joined by another kid, and the ball runs into the street. If you're like me, you're probably thinking about maybe Richard Horne is coming back. The boy does not seem to worry too much about looking both ways, but he finds the ball, and not only does he find the ball, he finds something worse than Richard Horne. It's Miriam, who is a victim of Richard Horne's, and she is somehow, some way, still alive. She crawled out from her trailer, and appears to have lost an eye. I mean, this guy, Richard Horne, of course, that's who we're talking about. What a jerk. He just does not get any better. So I don't know if she's still alive or not. She's crawling. She's in a great deal of pain, and I don't know if she collapses and she's unconscious or if she's actually passed away. But she is in really, really bad shape. Unfortunately, there are other people who are also having a bad day, and it's Becky is one of them. She's in much better physical condition than Miriam, but she has lost it. Stephen, her boyfriend, last time we saw him, they had a big fight. He was physically abusive. Now something's going on. We don't know what. She calls Shelley at work. She says it's something going on with Stephen. She needs the car right away. Shelley races home. Norma, it doesn't seem to mind. Norma's at her accounting booth in the corner. Everything seems to be under control. So I don't know. I don't know why Shelley can't take 5 minutes to go help out her daughter, who's married to a drug addict. And not only is she married to a drug addict, but they have guns in the house. So Becky grabs the gun, hears the car, runs out, and I didn't grow up. My parents were not that strict. Growing up, there were certain things that we just couldn't do. I don't know if one of them was to steal my mom's car while holding a gun, and then when she hopped on the hood, trying to communicate with me, to sort of spin the car around and throw her off the hood. I don't know if that was one of the things that I wasn't allowed to do growing up when I was a kid, but I think I just assumed that I would have been grounded. But apparently Becky is not grounded. So Shelley gets up. Gentleman of all gentlemen, Carl Rod is there. He comes to Shelley's assistance, and he knows what's going on in the trailer. He's heard about Becky and Stephen, their fights, and what must be happening inside. So he wants to help. He is concerned. So he does what every trailer park landlord does. He pulls out his whistle, and his magic VW taxi bus comes and says, "Okay, let's get to town. We're going to meet them at the diner. Not a problem." They hop in the van, and Shelley calls Norma, not on the landline that's been installed in the accounting booth for Norma, but on her cell phone, and she starts to tell what's going on. But Carl knows what's up, and Carl, this VW might be the coolest car I've seen in a while. It's got kind of lounge seating. There's an ashtray if you want to have a smoke. There's a coffee table, and guess what? There's also a CB radio. So Carl gets on the CB. He gets in touch with Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department dispatch, and everything is finds where Bobby is, and they get on the case. So they are going to figure out what's going on, and we're sort of this is the beginning of the episode. We're finishing here because I always like to finish in Twin Peaks, but this is the beginning, and we are off and running. We're basically in the middle of an action movie. We've got car chases. We've got dead or almost dead teachers, missing eyes. We've got Harry Dean Stanton with a whistle. I mean, this is, I don't know what's going to be in the next Fast and the Furious movie, but there are some very, very impressive things going on here. So they get on the CB and they're concerned. And we cut to, at first I thought we were at a hotel. It turns out we're at an apartment building. And we get to see a little bit, as well, Becky storms up the stairs and she screams. Turns out one of the neighbors knows what's going on. Basically says they already left. And we don't actually get a confrontation between Becky and Steven, but apparently Steven is meeting another woman, and we cut and we actually see them underneath the stairs. It appears in the credits, and I lied. I did see some of the credits. I didn't see all of them, but I did see some of them. There was Alicia Witt, a fantastic actress who's been in. She was in a great show. She was in The Sopranos. She's been all sorts of great stuff. We get to see a little bit of I don't know what else to call it other than Bob vision, sort of flying through the hallways and down the stairs, and we see Steven waiting there with another redhead. I'm not 100% sure that's Alicia Witt, but she's the only unfamiliar redhead that I remember being in the show. So Becky fires away. She shoots 5 shots into the apartment, and all sorts of people start to call Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department 911, and they're going to send someone. So there's a lot going on here. This place is this apartment building is somewhat busier than the Great Northern, full of Norwegians, but I'd say also far more dangerous. But this is not the end of the danger in Twin Peaks. So Becky calms down. It's later in the evening. Bobby and Shelley have found her and brought their lovely daughter to the diner, and they're chatting. And Becky seems to be ready to break up with him. She's somewhat defensive of Steven, but not completely. And we sort of find ourselves in a domestic situation, not not dissimilar to a lot of the mother, father, child conversations that Bobby found himself in as a kid, growing up. Obviously, he was on the other side of it, but it's nice to see Bobby being a good dad here and trying to help out. And just as they're having this moment, and you're sort of wondering, you're looking at this this not quite domestic bliss, because obviously Bobby and Shelley, things are not what they were between them, but we do see that there's love between them, and you're sort of wondering to yourself, geez, how could Becky end up with such a great father as Bobby is? How could Becky end up with really such a pig of a guy? And it's just as I was wondering that, good old Red, magical drug dealing Red, shows up and invites Shelley outside for a little bit of a pre-rendezvous rendezvous. It's a little bit uncomfortable mainly for me, but I assume also for Bobby and Becky and Norma, who's watching all of this. Norma apparently did not have her SAG card paperwork filled out, so they did not give her any lines this episode, but we see a lot of her. And right as Shelley sits back down in their booth, a gunshot rings out. So we start the first time we're in Twin Peaks this episode. Becky is shooting a gun. We come back into Twin Peaks. There's another gunshot in a place where there've been allusions to violence. There's been some threats, certainly in the good old days of Hank, but never a gunshot. And we go outside, and there's an argument going on. There's a family with a minivan, and apparently a little boy who is not afraid of cops or really anyone. A little boy grabbed his dad's gun and just decided to shoot it out the window and into the restaurant. No one got hurt. This little boy, if any of our double L's, yes, our loyal listeners, also happen to watch a little show, hasn't really quite on yet, called Game of Thrones. They should probably check out the Joffrey podcast, starring Bubba and Catfish. But this little kid, this little boy, I think he could be a really good partner for Lady Leora Mormont, I believe, the little girl. Anyway, she's a little girl who's always talking smack in the meetings with Jon Snow. Anyway, let's get back to Eastern and/or Western Washington State. So, while all of this is happening, outside, Bobby is trying to get a sense of it. Someone is laying on the horn like you wouldn't believe. Bobby doesn't seem to worry about it at first because, okay, there's a young boy who could play Damien in the next Exorcist movie. Or no, that's The Omen. Sorry. Where's Bubba when you need him? So he's dealing with that. There's someone is laying on the horn. If you're like me, you're just assuming it's Doris, but no, it's somebody else, and she's very upset. And I couldn't actually figure out who was sick because she's talking about someone needs to get home to be sick. Now, after a moment, she's talking about this person who's sick. After a moment, someone gets up from the floor of the front seat, and it looked like actually like a boy to me, not a little girl, but this child, whoever it is, this child is sick, and they didn't see The Omen, but they certainly saw The Exorcist. There is a steady stream of green vomit coming out of this poor kid. It seems to be possessed by something, someone. Again, Bobby doesn't seem to be overly concerned with that. I mean, we're horrified by this. It's disgusting. And the woman at the driver's seat is reacting very similarly to the woman from the 50s, where we first saw poor man's Abe Lincoln asking for a light in episode 8. She's terrified. Bobby is leaning over, very similar, but instead of driving away, there's just continuous just green vomit coming out. Hopefully, this kid did not have any of the takeout at the Double R, but maybe they could have had some of that black diseased dead corn that Hawk talks about. So we jump from the street, and we've got one of their deputies there along with Bobby to the sheriff's station, and it's late at night. Hawk and Sheriff Frank Truman are just chilling. They're chilling in the room where Waldo got shot, and doing some Google Map stuff. Hawk pulls out his map. It's very old, but it's always current. It's a living thing. So I'm guessing this is a map from the Nez Perce days, the very early days, the earliest days from, and if readers of The Secret History of Twin Peaks might remember, the first time we really learn about the Owl Cave and the ring, and some of the symbols was during these days, thanks to Meriwether Lewis. So Hawk is trying to explain as clearly and as carefully to Truman what's going on here, and he talks about a type of fire. It's like it's similar to electricity, and if it's good or if it's bad, it depends on your intention. So Hawk is really a great guide to us here and throughout the series. Obviously he told us about the intention of when you go into the Black Lodge. What happens if your soul is not pure, if your intentions are not pure, your soul will be annihilated. Here he's talking about this fire, this electricity. This, as Bubba would say, electricity is, what is it? Well, it depends on your intentions. And what this makes me think about a little bit is Well, what happens when Dougie Coop or Mr. C confronts either the doorway to the Black Lodge or this fire? We, I don't believe that Mr. C's intentions are going to be pure or without malevolence, and so I'd like to think that that would backfire on him, but he comes from that neighborhood. Maybe he's immune. We just don't know. So Hawk continues to explain not just to Frank Truman, but to the audience everything that we're seeing. Hawk is kind enough to use the same tone that he uses while explaining the birds and the bees to the Bookhouse Boys, and by that, of course, I'm referring to only Good Kid James. And they start talking about the symbolism of the dying corn and the fire and the black fire, and what does this all mean? Um, if you want further proof of how brave Hawk is, then I think it comes. Oh well. Actually, just let me back up for 1 second. Sheriff Frank notices something that they pulled out of the note that was in Major Briggs's tube that Bobby helped us find by throwing it around and all of that. I'm not going to call it mumbo jumbo, but there was a lot of stuff there that Bobby was. I'm glad that Bobby knew it. He asks what that symbol is, and Hawk tells him, "You don't want to know. You don't ever want to know." Hawk seems to know what it is, but he's just not going to tell him. I'm not sure if this is a Blue Rose situation where, someone who knows isn't going to tell. I really do think he's trying to protect Sheriff Truman. And if you need proof, as I was saying a second ago, if you need proof of how noble and how brave Hawk is, it's that when the log lady calls, he picks up the phone. If the log lady called for me after these past few episodes, I would tell Lucy, nope, I'm not here, no bueno, I had to go, I lost my cell phone, whatever it is, I would not pick up the phone. But Hawk does pick up the phone, and he talks to the log lady, and he talks to Catherine. They're talking about something very serious. Again, log lady's asking questions, talking about how the log is afraid of the fire. The log that we know from reading the book contains the soul of her beloved husband. There's something in the forest that's going wrong, but Hawk will not tell Margaret what's going on. Margaret gives him another warning, though, that there is fire where you are going. So here we go. We've got fire. We've got black fire. Fire, walk with me, as we all know, and fire where you are going. So maybe if they drive to the fire, they get a 4x4, then they'll be protected. I don't know. But it seems like episode 11 is where a lot of the biggest things, really do seem to come back. And, there is a knock on the door, and I don't know if this is just to, relieve tension, but this is Sub-Deputy, we'll call him Poor Man's Elijah Wood. I'm sure he's a wonderful actor, but he just kind of reminds me of Elijah Wood. He starts telling, it's Deputy Jesse, sorry about that, people. He starts telling Sheriff Truman about his cool new car, and, well, we're just left to think about all of what's going on in between Hawk and Sheriff Frank and the log lady. Now, we cut away, and just one thing that I didn't mention it earlier, but as we leave that scene, we have the log lady. I'm sure everyone remembers what happened to Josie, where when she died, her soul was trapped in the drawer pull. There's a lot of other wood in Twin Peaks. There's a lot of other wood in the sheriff's station, obviously in the Great Northern, obviously in all the homes. How many other souls are stuck there? That's something I've always thought about. And then when we leave Twin Peaks and we go back to South Dakota, where Diane is joining Cole and Albert for coffee and donuts, we see Cole's hand right above a wooden table. So is Cole going to get sucked into the wood? I don't know. There is a lot of big questions being asked, and for me at least, and Tell us, tell me at Extraordinary on Twitter. Tell Bubba at Fit and Trim. That's FITTENTRIN. M as in Montana. Tell us what you think about some of these questions that are being asked. For me, at least, I am totally fine with questions like this being asked. I'm more excited about these questions being asked than having the answers being explained, very clearly. I want them to. I want them. I don't need these things to be resolved, but I need. I don't need them to be answered in a clear way, but I need them to be answered in a satisfying way. One of the great things that we're getting to enjoy is, and after the last few episodes, there's not to say that there's not a lot of visual symbolism going on in this episode, but certainly it was much more a much more traditionally filmed and edited episode than episode 8 or some of the other episodes we've seen this year. But there's still a lot going on, and there's still a lot to think about, and I'm really enjoying this. For me, to be honest, it wasn't that I disliked much about this episode, but there's certain things where I just felt we were spending a little too much time getting in and out of things that I maybe didn't care so much about. So, and then we left too soon. So, whether it's Miriam, we wait a few minutes to notice Miriam, and then we just forget her. We forget that she's a witness to a murder of one of the most one of the wealthiest and one of the biggest jerks of all time, not just in town. We forget about her completely. We go and we spend time with Becky, and then we don't really spend too much time figuring out, well, what did we see in terms of this other dimension, and does this bring up questions? Maybe we should call our friends who used to, Ernie Hudson, and our friends who were tracking down Major Briggs. Cole knew about Project Blue Book. Shouldn't he be notifying them? Shouldn't he be telling them? I don't know. I don't know if that's something that's bothering you folks, but it was something that I was still thinking about. So those focusing on, just not focusing on what immediately came to mind and what are, what events that have really large and important implications, at least I think they should, based on everything that we've watched this season, that we've read in The Secret History, that we've watched in Twin Peaks, seasons 1, 2, and Fire Walk with Me. It seems like there's some major things going on that we're just kind of glossing over. So I'm excited about seeing more of that. We only have 7 weeks left. I'm going to say, Bubba, you were missed, but I tried to muddle through without you, so hope you're back. And if you had any Botox done, I will tell everyone. And while I'm at it, nobody get plastic surgery. Just you're all beautiful as you are. Just leave it as is. I'm going to sign off. This has been a really, really fun episode of Twin Peaks, and what I hope was a pretty enjoyable episode of Twin Peaks, The Gifted, and The Damned. And you all have a great night, and hope to see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Buddy, bye-bye. Buddy, bye-bye. Buddy, bye-bye. Buddy, bye-bye. Buddy, bye-bye. Buddy, bye-bye.